there. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. I'm very glad to have a chance to share a bit of information about some of the challenges that you're facing as homeschool families. And I homeschooled my kids myself. I actually did a hybrid of sometimes they were in school, sometimes we homeschooled exclusively, and part of the time we were involved in a co-op based on whatever was right for us at the time, depending on where we lived. So I have a lot of experience with a lot of the challenges that you do face, and trust me, any option that we pick and select for our families and our children, they all have their own set of challenges. So let's talk about the family and the couple in terms of prioritization and how to understand this. So here's what I would say. I'm an attachment specialist. So what I do is I focus on our primary, here we'll be talking about our primary attachments, which would be obviously our primary attachment figure is God, right? And then we have our marriage and our children, and then we have the family unit. And so we want to be properly attached to God and to each other in the proper roles, right? So we want to have the proper hierarchy of, there's the parents are the power base, the children, are cared for, and expectations are placed on them to follow through with the rules, and together that's supposed to work. It sounds like it should be so easy, but here is a few things that you can do to try to put some order to the chaos. So in the mainstream, when your children go to a regular school, there's a prescription for that. That's part of just regular society. It's a norm, right? It's a norm that we, wake up at 6, get our kids ready, get ourselves ready. They get on a school bus. They go to a school. They spend 8 to 3 at the school. They take the bus home. They come home and do their homework and have a snack. And then they have a certain amount of times after that to chill and relax and be with their friends or do whatever they do with you as a family. And then they go to bed, and the same thing starts over again 5 days a week with weekends off. So that's a prescription we're all familiar with. A lot of us were raised that way. That's how we live. Homeschool is where you're writing your own prescription and you're not really sure how to do it. Even if you read how to do it and you read blogs and you listen to podcasts and you talk to people about what has worked, everybody is different and everybody is going to have their own version of what's healthy. And so, first of all, the first thing we have to do is we have to pull back from condemning ourselves that we haven't figured out the perfect way yet. Because let me tell you, the simple prescription of the mainstream that I just described is fraught with problems, even though the prescription's ironclad, right? So it's like we really have, when we had that scenario for our kids, there was still so many problems that went with it. They were just, you're sick, you have to catch up. You want to go to a family reunion, you can't because you're on the school schedule. Somebody at school had the stomach bug, and now the whole family's sick. Blah, 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 right? The list goes on. We had to make choices about media and different things that we were constantly dealing with that regular school setting. So homeschool is no more chaotic than that prescription. The difference is there's no prescription. That's the difference. So if we can start to embrace the fact, okay, so we're doing the unprescribed. Okay, that means we are sort of off the beaten path. And there's no norm that we can cling to and say, hey, we're conquering this. So the metric of there's so many school days a year that you have to attend in the mainstream isn't the same metric for homeschool, right? Because we get more done in the day or less done in the day than a regular school. And we have to be aware of that. So one of the things we need to do is neutralize the condemnation we have for ourselves that we haven't found the right prescription. If you can first do that, you can actually hear what I'm saying. So I want you to just take some deep breaths. And please believe yourself when you say this. Please say, I'm homeschooling my children. I have not found the perfect prescription. And I fully and completely accept myself and mean it. Okay. Mean that. Fully and completely accept yourself. Because if you're spending all this energy and time condemning yourself, you will have no time or energy, or much less, to tackle the actual set of challenges you particularly are faced with. So let's not waste time with feelings. Let's go with facts. Attachment is the feelings point toward what's wrong, but oftentimes it doesn't really point to facts. So attachment is where we feel safe together, right? You need to feel safe in yourself as well. So the idea is going to be that how can I try to make this super like friendly? Okay, so having a feeling of I don't feel like homeschooling is not something we need to overcome. That feeling I've had a million times. I just don't feel like homeschooling today. I'm not going to argue with myself about that feeling. That feeling is not a fact, except that it's a desire. It's pointing to a lack of desire to do the thing. But that doesn't make me a bad person that I don't feel like homeschooling. And if I spend all this time trying to shut that feeling down, I don't have any time to actually do the activity. It's not a sin to have a feeling. What we need to do is take action, even if we don't want to. So if you wake up one morning and you say to yourself, I do not feel like homeschooling today, but I fully and completely accept myself and I'm going to homeschool. Let that be the end of it. Go and homeschool. A lot of homeschool families are just embedded in chaos and in self-condemnation. And starting from that place every day, which is actually a place of shame, is one of the biggest attachment rules that we deal with. Is what we want to do is we want shame to evaporate. We don't want to live in shame. Okay. Shame is the biggest enemy to attachment. It's really important that you understand that. So we want to neutralize some of these things that are myths that have become monsters. So a lot of people think that having a feeling is the most important thing. You have to want to do what you're doing for it to be fully a spiritually integrated experience, which is not true at all. There's many things we don't feel like doing, and we do them. And we don't have any problem with the fact that, we don't want to clean up the dog's mess. Like we don't want to, but we do it. And we don't argue with ourselves that well, we should want to do that. We have a pet, and everything about that pet should be something we want to do. So that's dogma for religion we don't need, right? Because you can have all the feelings in the world. You can feel all you want. It's what you do that matters, right? That's what matters. And God loves you fully and in present way at this moment in the condition you're in. That's not our question. We are securely attached to God. He is securely attached to us. That's not an area where you need to worry, though a lot of people do. But when it comes to homeschool and you're the primary figure in the success of this, you think orbits only around you, mom, if you're the homeschooling primary homeschooler, that's a lot of pressure. And yes, we do carry this into our marriages. And yes, our husbands will have some issues with us. And we struggle. It's really difficult to pour into your children and be their primary teacher. And also not let this drag in and drain the marriage. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to prevent that from happening. But since it's probably happening in a lot of groups here, let's target how to stop it. Okay. So we're going to go in with neutralization. One of the best things we can do is depersonalize something. That's why the Bible is about stories about other people. And you're like, okay, Joseph did that. And that story, that makes sense. I've seen myself in that condition, in that position. And the way we can do that is because it's a story about somebody else. It's a true story. And we can identify with that. That's externalization. And that is depersonalize something, where you depersonalize it and watch it happen to that person. And then you can personalize it and say, I can own that. Yeah, that happens to me. Because we always feel safer when we have others, right? When we're a community. And in that case, Joseph is our community, right? And we're like, I relate to that. So we want to neutralize something. I want to give you a technique to help you and your spouse be on the same page about homeschooling, period. First of all, sometimes we have one parent that wants to homeschool and the other parent that doesn't. That might be a part of this group. Here's an idea to try to get to the bottom of why we homeschool. And if we know the why, it's so much easier to do the thing. So here's, and you'll have I'll print out that you'll have for this to keep, to, do together. But the first thing is if you're in disagreement about the way it's done, or if you're doing it at all, homeschooling, right? With your spouse. Then here's an idea. Okay, this actually comes from a trick my mother taught me when I'm younger. And okay, so what she would do is say there would be a brownie that my sister and I had to split. So she'd say, okay, you and Kim are going to split this brownie. Go and cut it in half and give her a half, right? So, I'm 5. I don't know, maybe I'm not going to cut that brownie evenly. I might want a little bit more for myself. But the way she handled that was she said, we're going to split the brownie. So Robin gets to cut it and Kim gets to choose her piece. Okay, so this created an equal playing field for me to, with precision, measure the brownie and go right down the middle so that she wouldn't get any more than I did, because that was how she shared the responsibility. And that was really smart of her. So she neutralized the issue. We each had a responsibility, right? I got to cut the brownie, she got to choose the brownie, and everybody had good boundaries there about how much brownie they got. And I will say there were times where, I remember one time, this is a chocolate chip cookie, and my sister was having a horrible day. And I actually remember cutting it a little off and saying, I hope you picked a bigger piece, Kim, and that was kind of a teachable moment for me in just my heart or whatever. So, but she neutralized the situation by giving everybody a role that would be subject to justice. And that's the thing. So what we want to do is take the emotion out of it. And if you and your spouse can sit there together in a very calm way, and one of you cut it, one of you select the slice, meaning I'm going to write down all of the reasons why I think the homeschooling method we've selected, or homeschooling at all, is difficult for you. And the test is, how close was I to getting every single one of them? How close was I? This is showing your spouse that you show up in seeing them. And you're showing them, I see you. So you write and you ask them that they would have the same task. Write down all of the reasons why homeschooling is hard for me. So the first part is, how is it hard? What's the disadvantage? What would be particularly hard for him? What would be particularly hard for you? But you swap it. Don't tell him what's hard for you. Ask him if he can see you, and vice versa. And then compare the list. And take your time and breathe. I mean, light a candle and have a snack, just make this a time together. And then let's do the same thing with the opposite question. What are the advantages of homeschool according to the other? Okay? See how close you can get without inventing them. Whilst you can say, like, maybe you might say, this benefits you in a way, you're not even aware of, but you can throw that in there. One of those things, like maybe someone doesn't like waking up as early as a regular school would want, right? You can say it prevents a morning rush. And they hadn't really maybe considered that, but they might look and say, yeah, that is true. Thank you for seeing me. Because what you're saying is, my morning routine. So anytime you can show your spouse that you see them is an enormous part of attachment and bonding. The pillars of attachment are, do you see me? Do you hear me? Are you there? Can I trust you? If you can say that, in this exercise of the pros and cons of homeschooling from the other person's perspective, you are deepening that bond. And you are showing that person you see all of the reasons that it's hard, all of the reasons it's easy. And then you compare, what you have found. And then let's have a list, the two of you put together, where some of these things are that are hard about homeschool are also the best part about homeschool, right? They're going to be an overlap, right? Some of them are going to be, it's hard that we don't wake up early, but it's also hard that we don't wake up early because our day starts later and we feel like we're losing time or whatever, right? So there's going to be some that are on both lists. That's okay. So take your time and assemble that list. And then decide the things, each one of you very honestly. We're going to call this the 90-10 intervention because there's 90% of stuff that's just debris. I say this all the time. There's 90% of all of those lists that's just debris. It doesn't really matter, but how nice to be seen even in the small things. Thank you. You notice me. That means you see me, you hear me, you validate me, you trust me, you're there for me. Okay. So look at the things that are debris and be very honest. Okay, so you take his list about what's hard for you and you say, you got me here. This is great. You see me. Now, 7 and 9 and 12, that's fine. I don't really care about that. It is hard, but I call that debris. I can handle it. It's not going to the core. Then get into, we're probably about 90% of the things fall away. And then we have what we call the core 10%. This is not debris. These are the challenges, the actual challenges. When we can narrow and whittle down the parts that we can live with that are still just kind of inconvenient, we actually have the energy and the bandwidth to tackle the core, the 10% that really challenges our abilities, the way we function, the way we see the world, the way that we show up in the world, and things that are really difficult for us. And help each other with these things. So here you are, you've seen each other, you've heard each other, you've validated each other. There's no judgment as you're making these lists. Remember that. Don't use this as a tool of judgment. This is a tool of bonding. And together, one of you cut the problem, the other person gets to pick the slice. This is all in the interest of justice because part of attachment is justice. Our Father is a just God. And if he's a just God and he's our primary attachment figure, we need to be just with each other. Might sound not lovey-dovey. Justice sounds like a benign, harsh word. It's a beautiful word. Let's be just in the way that we have this discussion. So we're down to the 10%. And then you're going to be able to say, okay, this is what we need to spend our time and energy on, solving these problems. I guarantee you, if you really did that first, and these problems include, this is usurping our marriage. It's supplanting all of the time we have for our marriage. That's part of it for some people. But I guarantee you that when the first exercise should have moved the needle a bit so that you're entering into the 10%, the core problems, in a more willing and vulnerable space. That you're more willing and you're more vulnerable. You can say, maybe this something vulnerable like this, like, okay, you're seeing that I'm not a great multitasker, that I struggle with multitasking. And a lot of homeschool seems to really be about multitasking. And ask your spouse, say you're not, I'm not a great, just to let you know, I'm not a great multitasker. And my spouse is. So I would ask him, knowing what you know of me, so you're putting you're giving credit where credit's due, like you do know me. what do you think the solution is to help me with this challenge? Now, I hope the answer you get isn't don't homeschool. If you really are deciding about that you want to continue homeschooling. So I'm hoping that these answers aren't harsh. You're making yourself vulnerable. What would you suggest? And then stop talking and put on your curious ears, not your defensive ears or your terrified ears or your angry ears, your curious ears. And listen to your spouse answer the question. And spouse, please answer it justly. Do not use this to leverage your opinions about anything. Specifically answer the question. Knowing what I know of you, here's a suggestion. Now you, as he's speaking, you've got your curious ears on too. He's got his curious ears on. Everybody's curious about the information that's being exchanged. We're not listening through defense. We're not listening through chaos. We have calmed everything down. We have taken out the 90%. We're dealing with the core and we are together. We're seen, we are heard, we are validated. And yet remains these core issues that maybe feel unsolvable. So we're going to start tackling solving it. Okay, so one of the things might be, I feel like this house is always out of control. Okay, that's a very valid statement. And I'll tell you, a lot of husbands say this, and a lot of boys say, well, they're right. And I feel like a failure because I'm in charge of this thing and it is out of control. Okay. So yeah, there's that reality of lack of prescription. So we're going to write a prescription together. So here's what the expectation can be, but this isn't the capital E expectation where we're going to go to shame and failure or things like that. What we're going to say is our expectation is that our home is harmonious while doing difficult things. Like homeschool, it's a difficult thing. It is not a sin to think homeschooling is difficult. Okay, so if your feelings around homeschool are that it's difficult, accept yourself. That's fine. Like it is. Not for everybody. Some people homeschool is not hard. Those people, that's just how they function. It seems like they do it well. Some people struggle more. People have different cognitive functions, and that's something to discuss when we are discussing homeschool. And every couple should actually be able to understand their cognitions and the way that they process information. So I do that with people all the time, particularly homeschool families. So you can always get in touch with me if you want a couple of those sessions. But with your curious ears, listen to attempted solutions without just trying to shoot every one of them down, right? So a way that conversation can be safer is, okay, those are a lot of suggestions, and there's really two that I feel like I want to talk more about. You're not saying the other 8 were stupid. What you're saying is there's 2 that really grab me. Let's talk about that. A lot of the time, just the 2 things can help solve the problem, partly. Because then it falls on you to, okay, so here's these 2 suggestions that could help. Okay, setting alarms or doing things to music, period of time, whatever, however people like to do time management. There's a lot of creative ways that homeschoolers come up with. And so then you can write a prescription using these techniques that were offered. What happens is, if some of these suggestions are helpful and you actually apply them, you haven't failed. It isn't about that. It's honoring that this is a great idea. And I'm going to try it. And it may or may not work, but I'm going to try it. And you can come back and have this discussion again, because see, these lists you can make every 5 months, every month, based on the new information. Okay, we tried that. Now, what are the things about homeschool that are a disadvantage to you? Okay, what are the things that are working? You continue to have this and you continue to distill down what the problem is by neutralizing it, depersonalizing it, and both being part of the solution. And along the way, you're bonding. Now we bring our children into this also. We have a talk with them that's not shaming. It's nothing authoritarian where it's just this aggressive conversation. It's our family is a homeschool family. And we've opted to homeschool. And these are the main reasons because we're teaching always as homeschoolers, right? Why do we homeschool? Because this is a problem for mom and dad. This is a problem for mom and dad. This is a problem for mom and dad. And here are the things, age appropriately, you say this. Here's the things that make homeschooling hard for mom. And here's some things that make homeschooling hard for dad. Now, let's solve these problems together. Now, you and your spouse have already kind of had this discussion, but if the house is super messy because you're spending all day using it as a classroom, part of this educational situation is helping your children understand that they do have control over their lives and they do have control over their environment. They just have to take it. They have to do it. And you have to enforce it. So at the end of our homeschool day, which will end, let's say we're going to end every day by 2:00. I'm going to, so you can set 6 songs that take 30 minutes, right? So for these 6 songs, until they're done, we clean. Everything we can get our hands on, we just clean. That's part of our day. And pick good songs, like a nice playlist that you enjoy, and especially the very first time, and try to have levity. That organizing the environment is a thing we all do as a family. It's part of our bonding. It's something that you'll have memories about when you're older, and we will work this out together. And so you're making your children part of the solution rather than reminding them they're always the problem, right? These are really simple things, and you might think, well, we're already doing that or we tried. But if you try it in the order I'm telling you, it de-escalates things. So there's a whole different energy around these conversations because we don't feel like we're talking to our kids because we're afraid of how our husbands feel. We've already bonded and neutralized and really validated each other. We've neutralized these problems and depersonalized them and made it about solution-focused discussions. So the fear piece is gone. The tension between each other is gone, and your partner's in solutions. And so then that carries over in that conversation with your kids. And so they're part of the solution too. And you tell them when you do the playlist, when we start our great playlist, and maybe you let the kids take turns picking, you put the playlist together, they get to want 1, 2, or 3, and they pick what they want. That can be part of what they get to choose. And then you let them know, kids, you might not feel like cleaning, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you that you don't feel like cleaning. Celebrate yourself. You don't feel like cleaning. It's even better that you didn't feel like it and you did it because it was the thing to do. We can't prepare the path for the child, but we can prepare the child for the path. Children need to learn to do things they don't feel like doing, and they don't need to shut down their feelings of not wanting to do it. That's a waste of time. That will come in their own way. You don't have to shut them down. Those feelings will evaporate with what we call second order change. First order change is we do what we're told so we don't get yelled at. Second order change is when I do that, my life is better, so I do it. So that's the way you march towards second order change with kids, is that you justly mandate, and you justly celebrate, and you justly organize the system. That's what you do with justice. Okay, very simple. Your job right now, kids, and my job, is we're going to clean for this playlist every day. That's part of our routine. And it's helpful to have an opening routine for homeschool and a closing routine so that biologically and neurologically we know this is the time of this and this is the time we end it. It even might be that you're doing a field trip day, but you have your morning ritual of the way you start school, and then you have we get home and we do the playlist. You can even make the playlist 15 minutes. If you've got 3 or 4 kids, I mean, you can get a lot done in 15 minutes, right? And then the house is more orderly and you're in more of an organized environment, outer order, inner calm. There's a lot to that. And take a breath in a minute and even say halfway through the cleaning, this place already feels better. This is great. I'm so grateful that we are a family of solutions. And continue to narrate this positively with your kids. Then you're successful and you do have a metric. We did the 5 songs. That's a metric to measure, was this successful? And everybody does their best. And you start working on this and it becomes a habit. So then let's say dad gets home and the house is more orderly. It may not be perfect, but it's going to be more orderly. And it worked. And as you go, this will evolve and this will become, more of where you're going to target it more. Like, you know what? We actually only need 4 songs, or we enjoyed so much we could even do 7, because sometimes we just wish the playlist would go on. And that's, what we hope for, right? Because we would love these things to become a part of us, to integrate the justice we have, the attachment we have in our marriage, and that'll translate into the way we treat and function within our families. So that's an idea. We've depersonalized, we've neutralized, we've solution focused, targeted what the obstacles are, and we continue to do that again and again until we find the prescription. And you can tell your kids, we're trying to find the prescription. And then you can even do this with your kids too. You can say to the kids, I'm going to write down all the ways I think homeschool is hard for you. And I'm going to write down all of the ways that I think homeschool is hard for me. Can you do that as well? And you have them do it. Write it down and let them write or tell you all of the ways they think it's hard for you and why it's great for you. It is not wrong that children know that some things are hard for you. You're not failing as a parent. You're showing them the hard things that we face in homeschool are a drop in the bucket of the hard things we're going to face in life. So we're not going to shut down our feelings about it. We're just going to function within it. Our feelings don't make us bad people. What we do are good things, or they're not good things. So it's our actions that matter. So not every day in the regular prescription of regular school are we paying attention or feeling great, or is our teacher in a great mood? I mean, that's just life, right? You're going to have those days. So allow yourself a certain amount of days per year to say, it's a wash of a day. We're going strawberry picking, which is like, we're changing routes here. The class today is strawberry picking, whatever. There's going to be a time you need to just get out and have a hike or take a walk or whatever. And so allow yourself normal living, right? But the prescribed regular school life has become this huge beacon of, even if you say you reject the conformity of that, it's still there. It's still out there, this big looming neon sign that we didn't measure up. And whether or not you understand that's going on, that is going on in your subconscious. And so when we have to plan time for our marriage, that's whether your kids are in regular school or homeschool. Right? We still have to plan time for marriage, because school comes with extracurriculars and sports and all of these other things we're doing where we're traveling back and forth and all of that. So is there a perfect answer? No. Is homeschool a great option? Yes. For many, many families, it's a great option. And there are things you can do that are fun unless you feel like it exerts pressure on you. One thing we had was 3 times a week, I did tea time. And that was always went over well. And what we would do is we would study really cool things about marine life. That was something my kids loved to learn about. And we would pick a marine animal, like octopus, and study it during tea time. And that's what we would do. For tea time, we're talking about the octopus, we would do that. And they really enjoyed that because we always had a theme. Some people have like planets, or they have, just whatever, part of the body or something. But we would incorporate that in tea time. And so that's actually one of the things that my kids, when they discuss homeschool, well, that was kind of cool. We always liked that because there was always a banana bread or some sort of thing that was there that would kind of felt special, but that became a routine and a rhythm. And it's the rhythms that stabilize us. So developing rhythms in homeschool. And if you miss a step, just it's like a medicine. If you skip this dose, just take the next dose at the right time. Okay, so you're going to miss a dose. That's going to happen. And that's why it's really good to have, I always say the last day of your homeschool week was always the day where we have a certain time allotted for all of the things you missed that we had planned. And I was a big fan of Saturday night after Sabbath, I would plan my week. And it was always such a beautiful fairy tale, though it had ended up becoming. But at least I had an outline. And so not always did I succeed. And I changed my narrative of what success looked like because I at least had an outline. And then I had my mission statement of what I want to cover, why I want to cover it, how I'm going to do it. And when life gets in the way, because you know what, people get strep throat, we had sort of a plan for that. So it sounds like I was a lot more organized than I was. The way I hope I'm not coming across that way. It was not always easy on my marriage. It was not always easy on my kids. It was not always easy on me. And sometimes it was. Sometimes it was fine. There are things where you'd see other parents rushing around to all these things, and we weren't, and that was something that was not lost on my husband or me. Like, wow, we're glad we're not, like that. Or the whole school would be sick with this horrible flu and we wouldn't have it. Even though we would still have our kids, with other kids, it was like they just weren't a part of whatever that system was. So we had a lot less sickness and a lot of different things going on. So there are just a lot of perks. So I'm just thinking that when you're thinking about intervening, right? Homeschool doesn't happen to you. It's something you do. So remember that. It's intentionality that's very important. Justice is a part of this. But if you want to take this next level to leverage homeschool as a tool for attachment, this doesn't have to split you and your spouse apart. It can be the mechanism by which you become closer because you can demonstrate to them, this is a huge part of our life, and I see you, and I hear you, and I can see why that's hard. So I validate you, and I'm curious about what you think we should do. And that you would cherish me enough to hear what I think we should do. So I'm putting my curious ears on and I'm listening to you. I'm not listening to reply, I'm listening to hear. And then I'm going to take a second. Responding really quickly on homeschool discussions is typically not a great idea because it reflects that you are already ready with your answer and not really letting them finish. So let them finish what their idea is, take a breath, and then start talking and responding to what they said without changing topics. Respond to what they say very particularly. Reflect back what they said. Okay, so what you're saying is that what's very difficult is when you come home, it's super chaotic in terms of orderly messes, like disordered messes. And that you kind of just want to come home to a more comfortable environment. And I feel drained by what I've already done to get that to happen. So let's try this family technique of we're all a family and we're all part of the solution. And bringing the kids in on the playlist and the cleaning. And so I'm going to try that. We're going to give it 14 days. We're going to give it 2 homeschool weeks. And then we're going to reassess. Give it a good try. That'll be 10 times if you do a 5-day week. That'll be 10 opportunities for that to be successful. And then go back with these worksheets, do this in pencil, erase everything, or copy them and save what it used to be. So you can see the progress, right? And let's go through this again. Now that we've revamped things, this is why I think homeschool is hard for you. And then you keep doing it. You see how that works? It's kind of like the Torah portions every year. As we grow and change and morph and be enlightened or go through grief or whatever we do every year, the same portion the year before, we get something different out of it in a certain way for whatever those reasons are. So this is how to leverage homeschool as an attachment tool. rather than needing tools to deal with the lack of attachment homeschool's bringing. Does that make sense? So you'll get that sheet. You will have the sheet that'll have the questions. And just to sum up what we've done here, we discussed what attachment is. We talked about how important it is for us to be in families and in a couplehood where we feel seen, we feel heard, someone's there for us and we can trust them. That they care about your needs and they do what they can to meet them while recognizing they can't meet all of them. Some of them you have to meet for yourself. We're being vocal and we're sharing our vulnerabilities. We're sharing our needs. We're sharing the things that are difficult for us. And there's no shame in this. This is all justice. Okay? Sometimes we feel like homeschool isn't fair. Why is everything so polluted out there that this is the answer? And I feel back to a corner, right? You might share that. You might have that in common, that you're both, annoyed. I remember one time we were dealing with the computer and there was something on the computer I felt like was a waste of time that people were engaged in. And my husband didn't think it was a waste of time because they had fun, whatever. And then one time they were doing the thing and it's a game they were playing or something, some little, wasn't a bad game. It's just something I thought was stupid, but and they clicked on there's a virus and it affected our computer and actually we had to get a new computer. And my reaction was, that, that's what I'm telling you. That game is a waste of time. Now we have to buy a new computer. And my husband's like, there are good things about that game that was good for the kids. And we were both wrong. The conversation should never have been about the game. It should have been about the person who sat in some basement bored and having evil thoughts in their heart to make a virus to hurt people they don't even know and disrupt their computers. We had the focus on the wrong thing. We were mad. It's like, wait a second. We should be mad at whoever this stranger is. They are the ones that didn't operate in justice. And once we had a common enemy, we were like indignant, right? That was annoying. Now, did we agree on that in the end? I mean, it was kind of funny because he was like, oh, we're just not going to play that game. I don't ever want to have that happen again. And I was like, yeah, but I did kind of realize there were some bonuses and strategy with what that game was. So it's interesting how we switched roles a little bit because there's no pressure, right? But we didn't realize that what we were mad at was each other rather than someone else who had caused the harm. We hadn't caused the harm to each other. So it's depersonalizing it, right? And getting into that space. So I do hope this helps you. You just let me know if there's any other support I can offer. If you do want a cognitive session, a couple of those are really helpful. Very eye-opening for parents to help them to embrace, understand, figure out how to homeschool effectively, tailored to them. And that's something that is very valuable. So I'd be happy to do that. But I am hoping that this was helpful to you, that you found something valuable in it and you have the printout that you can use. And I look forward to hearing from anyone that has any further questions. And I hope that the rest of your time discussing these homeschool pieces is fruitful and peaceful and that you're finding your solutions. So shalom.